The fact that I'm here makes my heart break, that we have to do this because of the reason. But by the same token, I love talking about them because it's genuine and it's rare. And so I just wish there was no reason to do this. Rob, as smart as he was very naive in many areas.
Silence in Hollywood isn't random, and it's never free. It's usually traded like a high-value asset, passed around to protect legacies, reputations, and billion-dollar images. But the silence that surrounded Albert Brooks for weeks straight wasn't strategic at all. That kind of quiet doesn't come from lawyers or managers. It comes from pain settling in deep. The kind of pain that sits in your chest and doesn't let you breathe. What makes this hit harder is the history behind it. This wasn't some surface-level industry friendship. Albert Brooks and Rob Reiner go back over 60 years, way before spotlights, awards, and red carpets. Before All in the Family, before Taxi Driver, before Rob Reiner became the filmmaker people credit with shaping an entire era of cinema. Back then, they were just two kids chasing laughs, cracking jokes, and dreaming big without knowing how heavy the future would get.
This is where we met, but of course, there's nothing left of it, just like our friendship.
Yeah.
We sat on that bench.
We did?
So when Albert finally stepped up and spoke about what really went down inside that Brentwood home, people leaned in hard. And what came out of his mouth wasn't polished, wasn't filtered, and definitely wasn't approved by any PR team. It was raw emotion spilling out. It was frustration, regret, and anger, all mixed together. And honestly, it flipped the entire story on its head. Most folks skim headlines and keep it moving. They see words like tragedy and arrest and scroll right past without thinking twice. But this situation deserves more than a glance. Albert isn't just grieving a longtime friend here. He's pulling the curtain back on a long-standing breakdown that's been ignored, excused, and brushed under the rug for decades. He's saying out loud what people in powerful circles usually whisper behind closed doors. For weeks, the public narrative has focused heavily on Nick. Everything's been framed around unconditional love. Article after article paints Rob and Michelle as almost saint-like parents who gave everything they had to support their troubled son. And to be clear, no one's denying that they care deeply. But Albert's perspective cuts in a different direction. It's heavier, it's uncomfortable, and it doesn't sugarcoat anything. Albert is speaking from the point of view of someone who was actually there. Someone who sat in that living room 3 years ago, 5 years ago, even 10 years ago. Someone who watched things slowly unravel while everyone else stayed silent out of politeness or fear of crossing a line. He describes it like watching a disaster inch closer while nobody wanted to be the one to say, "This isn't okay." He's not attacking Rob for loving his son. That's not the point he's making at all. What Albert keeps stressing is that love without limits, love that refuses to acknowledge reality, can turn dangerous fast. When love becomes blind, when it ignores clear warning signs, it stops protecting and starts enabling. And that's the word Albert keeps coming back to, enabling. Instead of going on a massive talk show or sitting across from a celebrity interviewer, Albert chose something quieter, but more personal.
This is the first time both of us have been back since
Right.
we graduated.
Over a certain age, it's against the law.
Only for you, though.
Well, life works best when you remember. You remember, nobody bothers you, that's the way it was, I looked great. When you have to confront the actual people you were with, oh my God, who are you?
He spoke privately to a small circle of industry veterans, people who knew Rob before fame changed everything, people who understood the full backstory. And now, fragments of that conversation have started circulating, and what they reveal is chillingly honest. Albert didn't speak in vague terms either. He gave details. He described a specific night roughly 8 months before everything finally collapsed. It was supposed to be a relaxed dinner. Just Rob, Michelle, Albert, and a few close faces around the table. No tension, no drama planned. Then Nick showed up without warning. Anyone who's dealt with long-term family struggles knows that moment. The energy shifts instantly. Conversations die mid-sentence. People exchange looks without saying a word. But Albert says Rob reacted differently. Not with fear, not with frustration, but with heartbreaking hope. Like maybe this time things would be different? Like maybe this was the turning point? Albert paused when he described that moment. And the people listening felt it. Because that kind of hope can be beautiful, but it can also be dangerous when reality keeps proving otherwise.
Rob, as smart as he was very naive in many areas.
Albert Brooks met Rob in high school, and they were lifelong friends.
Rob had trouble with women. Rob was shy. And then Rob, on the film, met the love of his life. I was always told that when he met Michelle on that movie, the ending changed.
Albert didn't say Nick was beyond help. He didn't say Rob failed as a father. What he did say was that ignoring the storm doesn't stop it from coming. And that's where his words hit the hardest. Because this isn't just about one family or one home in Brentwood, it's about a culture that protects image over intervention, a system that rewards silence and punishes honesty. Albert didn't sound bitter. He sounded exhausted, like someone who wished he'd spoken louder sooner. And that's where his story cuts deep. Because once you hear it, it's impossible to unhear it. Rob stood up the moment Nick walked in, arms open, ready to pull his son in like nothing was wrong. But Nick wasn't there to eat, catch up, or make peace. He came with a demand. And it wasn't pocket change either. We're talking about serious money, the kind of money people use to patch over problems that should have been handled long ago. Albert says the vibe in the room flipped instantly. Conversations froze, plates sat untouched. And then there was Michelle. Albert says when he looked at her face, what he saw wasn't irritation or disappointment. It was fear, real fear. And that detail matters because that fear didn't start that night. It had been living in that house for years, unnoticed and unspoken. Albert admits that after seeing that look, he couldn't stay quiet anymore. He pulled Rob aside, away from the table, out onto the patio where no one else could hear. He didn't soften it or dance around the truth. He asked his oldest friend straight up, "How long are you gonna let him hold you hostage?" What haunts Albert now is Rob's response. Rob didn't snap back. He didn't defend Nick. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked worn down like a man carrying too much weight for too long. And then he said something Albert can't forget. He said, "If I stop, he ends himself." Rob truly believed his money, his attention, his constant presence were the only things standing between Nick and the edge. In Rob's mind, pulling back meant losing his son forever.
My father died when I was young, 11 and a half, and I met Rob Reiner in my freshman year at high school, and I became really close with his father, Carl. And Rob had issues because it was his father. That communication was not going well, but Carl could dump all of what he wanted to say on me, and I never got so much encouragement. I mean, first of all, I was like 16, and I would go there, and I would make him and Mel Brooks and Norman Lear and Neil Simon laugh till they almost fell off the couch.
What he didn't realize was that by constantly shielding Nick from consequences, he was slowly inviting that danger straight into his own home. That's where Albert's perspective starts making people uncomfortable, because he refuses to let mental health become a full excuse. Not a factor, not something to ignore, but not a free pass either. We live in a time where every story turns into an explanation tour. Trauma, addiction, pressure, upbringing. And yes, Nick had struggles. The substance issues were no secret. But Albert cuts through all of that with brutal honesty. He says he grew up around addiction. He knew plenty of people in bad shape back in the day. Plenty of lost kids, and they didn't cross this line. He's pushing back on the idea that Nick was only a victim of his own mind. He suggests there was something darker there, something personal. Albert believes there was deep resentment, not just frustration, but anger aimed directly at the people who raised him. He talks about jealousy, something the mainstream coverage keeps skipping over. Imagine growing up under the shadow of Rob Reiner, every move you make compared to legendary films. The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Stand By Me. There's no room to just exist when your last name is that heavy. Albert recalls a moment years earlier on a set. Someone casually mentioned Rob in passing. Nick snapped instantly. Not playful, not annoyed, but furious. Albert says that wasn't rebellion. That was bitterness, a kind that festers when someone feels invisible next to greatness. From Albert's point of view, Nick didn't just want money. He wanted to tear down the image, the legacy, the pedestal. This wasn't a situation that spun out of control by accident. Albert believes it was intentional, an act meant to destroy the symbol that had haunted Nick his entire life. And now Albert is furious about what he sees coming next. The legal strategy is already taking shape. The defense attorney, Alan Jackson, is experienced and sharp. Albert knows exactly what angle they're going to push. A sick young man, failed by the system, overwhelmed by pressure. And Albert is scared it might work. He's been telling anyone who will listen not to let the narrative flip. Because the next move is obvious. Turn Rob into the problem. Say he pushed too hard, or didn't push enough. Say the Reiner name was a burden. Say the parents are somehow responsible for their own ending.
When they did 2,000-Year-Old Man, my father and Mel, it became the hippest thing to be Jewish. When I was 16 years old, I'd come home from school and put on the album, the 2001, and I listened to it every day. I listened to it for months on end. I mean, it was like, it was like going to church. It was like a religion, you know? I mean, it was absolutely, and when I was 16 and I wrote a joke for them, and I told them this joke, and they used it, and I mean, to me, it was like the biggest thrill of my life. It was the derivation of applause.
Albert says that's the cruelest part. The ones who are gone can't defend themselves. They can't explain their choices. They can't push back. And that's why Albert is speaking now. He's not chasing attention. He's stepping in as the voice Rob no longer has. Because if he doesn't speak, the story gets rewritten by people who weren't there. And Albert refuses to let that happen. Albert isn't just a witness to the love in that house. He's also a witness to the damage Rob quietly lived with for years. That's the part that's making people uncomfortable now. Because it wasn't just chaos or confusion. According to Albert, there were moments that crossed into straight-up emotional harm, and Rob absorbed it without pushing back. One story Albert shared left the room completely silent. It's centered on Michelle Reiner. Michelle was the balance. She was the creative soul, the photographer, the artist, the one always trying to smooth things over and keep everyone grounded. Albert struggled to even get the words out when talking about her. He revealed that just weeks before everything ended, Michelle called him out of the blue. She didn't spell things out directly. She didn't say Nick's name. Instead, she asked about security systems. She asked about safe rooms. Think about that for a second. This wasn't someone living in a risky area or an exposed home. This was Brentwood, gated, guarded, locked down. Michelle wasn't worried about break-ins. She wasn't scared of strangers. She was scared of someone who already had access, someone who knew the codes, someone who could walk in without knocking. Albert told her to change the codes immediately. He told her to bring in professional protection, to put distance between fear and reality. What eats Albert alive now is that he doesn't know if she ever did. That "I should have done more" feeling hasn't left him. He keeps replaying it, wondering if he should have driven over himself, wondering if standing guard could have changed anything. That guilt sits heavy and it shows every time he speaks. You have to understand how deep this friendship ran. Albert Brooks and Rob Reiner weren't just close. They were almost the same person split into two bodies. They shared instincts, humor, timing. They built careers side by side. Losing Rob didn't just take away a friend. It took away half of Albert's world. And now that grief has turned into something sharper, anger with purpose. Albert is tearing down the glossy Hollywood image that usually shields powerful families. Normally, when a celebrity's child spirals, the machine kicks in. Rehab statements, privacy requests, quiet exits. Albert says that silence is exactly what let things spiral out of control. He believes if someone had stepped in years ago, the outcome could have been different. He claims there was an incident where Nick threw a chair through a window, a moment that should have triggered serious intervention, but no one called authorities. Why? Because you don't call authorities on Rob Reiner's son. You call a private doctor. You call a handler. You call someone who makes it disappear. That's the accusation Albert is making loud and clear. In his eyes, privilege didn't protect this family. It trapped them. Being able to avoid consequences meant Nick never hit a real stopping point. There was always a cushion, always a check, always a cleanup, until there wasn't. Albert says the system failed because it bent instead of standing firm, and the price of that flexibility was devastating. It's a brutal accusation, but one he refuses to soften. People who've seen the few clips of Albert speaking say he looks unrecognizable. Older, heavier. The sharp wit that once defined him feels buried under shock. He described the moment he found out, and it wasn't even from the family. He got the call from a mutual business contact who heard it over a police scanner. Let that sink in. Finding out your closest friend's life has ended through radio chatter before anyone calls you directly. Albert says he drove straight to Brentwood. He saw the flashing lights, the tape, the chaos. He tried to push past the perimeter, shouting that he was family. And none of it mattered. The officers didn't recognize him. Or maybe they didn't care. To them, he was just another older man yelling at a secured scene. That image, Albert standing behind the tape while the people he loved were treated like case files, is burned into his memory. Now, with the trial set for January, Albert has made his position clear. He plans to be there, front and center, right behind the prosecution. He wants Nick to see him, to look him in the eyes. Albert knows every promise that was made, every excuse, every check written to calm things down. He's a living record of years that never made headlines. And that's what makes him dangerous to the defense. Because he doesn't rely on speculation, he relies on memory, and he's done staying quiet. Meanwhile, the Reiner siblings, Jake and Romy, have asked for peace. They want privacy, and Albert understands that. But he believes silence already cost too much. And this time, he refuses to let it win. The siblings have asked for forgiveness, and that choice belongs to them. They're grieving in a way only children can when they lose parents and a brother at the same time. They're trying to protect the memory of Rob and Michelle without completely erasing Nick from their lives. That's a delicate, almost impossible line to walk, and they're doing it with grace. But Albert isn't walking that same path, and he's been very clear about why. He isn't family by blood. He doesn't carry the same obligation to forgive no matter what. He was Rob's friend, and the friend isn't looking for closure. The friend is looking for accountability. Albert says grief doesn't have to mean silence, and forgiveness doesn't have to mean pretending nothing happened. While the siblings are choosing peace, Albert is choosing truth. And that truth has put him at odds with a lot of powerful people. He's been openly furious about how the industry reacted, the flood of public posts, the long captions, the carefully worded messages from people claiming heartbreak.
Wait a minute. Here we go. Look at this. Albert Brooks.
Back at their old high school, the two old pals find themselves on the wall of fame.
Look, see, there's me right there. There's me.
Friends still making each other laugh.
Albert says many of those same people hadn't spoken to Rob in years. Some hadn't returned calls. Some quietly distanced themselves when things got uncomfortable. And then there are the ones who knew Nick was unstable, who whispered about it, who warned others in private, but still invited him to parties, still let him hang around, all because of his last name. Albert doesn't name them publicly, but everyone in those circles knows exactly who he's talking about. He calls it performative grief, a public show without private responsibility. Albert isn't interested in sympathy posts. He wants answers. He wants to know who supplied Nick with substances that night. He wants to know who drove him to that house. He wants every layer of protection, every silent helper, every enabler exposed. That's why this story matters so much. This isn't just celebrity drama or gossip. It's a real-world example of what happens when money, fame, and fear mix with addiction and unchecked behavior. It forces uncomfortable conversations about where love ends and responsibility begins. Rob Reiner spent his career telling stories where love wins, movies that taught generations to believe love conquers everything, that true love survives all obstacles. But Albert is standing in the wreckage, saying something people don't want to hear. Love didn't stop this. Love made it possible. Love provided access. Love kept doors open that should have been closed. It's a brutal reversal of everything those films stood for, and that's why it hurts so deeply. Albert shared a moment from funeral planning that shattered everyone listening. He was sitting with Jake and Romy, sorting through photos for the memorial. Pictures of Rob on set, Michelle laughing, family moments frozen in time. Then they came across an old photo from about 15 years earlier, the whole family together. Nick standing there smiling, looking calm, looking normal. Albert said his first instinct was rage. He wanted the photo gone. He couldn't stand the image. To him, it felt like a lie preserved on paper. But the siblings stopped him. To them, that wasn't a symbol of harm. That was still their brother. A version of him that existed before everything fell apart. That difference in perspective says everything. That's where the real tension lives in this story. The family needing to remember the good, and the friend unable to separate the past from what it became. Neither side is wrong. They're just carrying different weights. And then there's the toll this is taking on Albert himself. He's in his late 70s. This level of stress isn't something the body shrugs off. Sleepless nights, constant replaying of moments, anger that won't settle. Albert has hinted that he feels his own time slipping, not because of danger, but because grief changes the body. Losing Rob wasn't just losing a friend. It was losing a piece of himself, someone who'd been there through every era of his life. He shared a memory from years ago during filming. The chaos, the jokes, the non-stop laughter. Albert said Rob was the only person who could make him laugh until he physically couldn't breathe. Now that laughter is gone, and the silence feels heavy. He's tried watching their old work, tried revisiting the memories, but he can't. Every smile brings back images he can't shake. Albert says the quiet is louder than anything. And that's why he keeps talking, not for attention, not for revenge, but because silence already took too much, and he refuses to let it take anything else. Albert believes something else was taken too, something people aren't talking about enough. He feels Nick didn't just take Rob's life, he took his legacy with him. Think about it. How do you sit down and watch When Harry Met Sally now without that thought creeping in? The joy is still there, but it's stained. The laughter comes with weight attached to it. But the most disturbing detail Albert shared had nothing to do with money, fame, or films. It was about Nick's eyes. Albert said the last few times he saw him, something was missing. Not sadness, not anger, not even intoxication, just emptiness. He described it like a building after everyone's moved out. Lights on, structure standing, but nothing inside. And what makes this hit harder is Albert insists Rob saw it too. They were both looking at the same thing, but they read it completely differently. Albert saw it as a danger sign, a moment where you step back, where you create distance, where you protect yourself. Rob saw it as pain, pain that needed comfort, pain that could be fixed with love, support, and patience. That difference in interpretation is where the tragedy lives. One man ran toward the fire carrying hope like water. The other man was yelling to back away, and the man with the water got burned. As the January trial approaches, Albert has made it clear he isn't staying quiet anymore. He's done playing the funny guy, done being the background voice. He's stepping into a new role, whether people like it or not. Albert knows how this system works. He knows how stories get reshaped in court. He knows juries can be swayed by emotional backstories, by childhood struggles, by carefully crafted narratives that soften responsibility. He also knows expensive legal teams know exactly how to blur lines, how to make reality feel complicated enough to doubt. That's why Albert is speaking now. He's drawing a line in the sand. His message is blunt. Rob and Michelle were not villains. They weren't negligent monsters. They were parents who loved deeply. And in Albert's view, they became targets because of that love. It's harsh, it's uncomfortable, and it goes against our instinct to protect grieving families with silence. But Albert says silence already failed them. He believes truth is the only remaining form of respect, not comforting phrases, not gentle rewrites, not pretending things were peaceful when they weren't. Albert keeps returning to one detail that refuses to leave him. He says Rob was afraid that night. That's the part he won't let anyone erase. He doesn't want the world thinking Rob drifted away calmly. He wants it known there was fear, confusion, panic, because that fear matters. It matters in court. It matters in accountability. And it matters because Albert wants consequences to match what happened. This isn't revenge for him. It's grief sharpened into purpose, a demand that pain not be minimized, that reality not be softened for comfort. So when updates about the Reiner case start flooding timelines, Albert wants people to pause. Look past legal jargon, look past procedural delays. Picture Albert sitting alone in his home, surrounded by 6 decades of memories, old jokes, shared milestones, conversations that will never happen again. Think about the phone call he's waiting for. Not the one announcing progress, not the one explaining delays, the final one, the one that says accountability has landed. And even when that call comes, Albert knows it won't bring peace, because justice doesn't bring people back. It doesn't refill empty rooms. This isn't a movie. There's no late twist, no surprise redemption, no clean ending where music swells and everything feels resolved. There's just the slow fade that real life delivers. And Albert is standing there refusing to look away. He keeps saying the signs were there, that warnings were ignored, that discomfort was avoided because it was easier. The real question isn't whether this story will end. It will. The question is whether anyone will actually learn from it, because the media will try to soften it. They'll replay award speeches, showcase smiling photos, talk about healing and moving forward. Albert is here to remind everyone the wound is still open, still raw, still real. And sometimes the hardest truth of all is this: the people closest to us aren't always safe. And sometimes the only person who sees the danger coming is the friend standing off to the side, screaming into the noise, powerless to stop the crash. The question now is simple: are we finally listening?